Welcome to the studio right here on the campus of Grace Fellowship, a church for all nations in sunny South Florida. Glad to have you guys watching from wherever you are watching. I'm here with Dr. Josh Robinson and Dr. Larry Starkey, and we want to always clarify, Josh and I, when we're in any context, that we both have the last name Robinson. I have a blood brother by the name of Josh Robinson, but there's no relationship here in terms of blood because we don't practice nepotism here. So glad to have you guys watching. And again, welcome to the studio here at Grace.
Pastor Jeff, I have to interrupt real quick. Interestingly, Josh and I are probably closer than the two of you because we grew up in the same hometown area.
Yes.
So different names, but closer.
And there's always been rumors about our hometown that...
Those are fighting words to us.
Yes.
Everybody has something to say about.
Yes, and it's from the great state of Ohio.
Oh, yes.
Which my wife's family is also from. Yes. And they have a saying. They say everyone's from Ohio, but nobody lives there, right? Because Ohioans have taken over the world. Well, good to have you guys here with us, and we're going to be diving into some content today, really giving an overview, a look back to some apologetics content that we've walked through for a number of months now. But before we do that, if you're here at Grace, we're continuing our Forward Initiative, dedicated children's ministry building out some expanded parking that is very much needed. Thank you guys for being behind that, and it's just awesome to see the process just continue right here on Okeechobee Boulevard. Also, with the growth that we're experiencing here at Grace, by God's grace, we're seeing a number of people respond to the good news of Jesus Christ, follow in believers' baptism, get plugged into avenues for discipleship, and becoming a fully mature follower of Jesus. And so with that growth comes some need for, really, I guess we could use the word retooling. Yeah. And so while we have had some great engagement and viewership with these deep dive episodes, we'll be taking a break from deep dive for this season while continuing our mission. But we would love to hear from you if you've been following us, or if you've had some questions throughout just hearing some of this content, us engaging with some questions that we may not have time to explore on Sunday morning. You can go to our website, gograce.church/connect card, and just let us know any questions that you have, and we would love to be here to serve you and further engage in some of these conversations if that's the direction that you would like to go. But Larry, help us understand, just kind of looking back of what we've done for quite a while now, what exactly is apologetics and who cares, right? Why does it actually matter?
Yeah. Well, again, as you mentioned, for the last several deep dives, we've been talking about this book, Persuasive Apologetics, The Art of Handling Tough Questions without pushing people away. And this is more than a book, more than a random book. This has been a real great instrument that the Lord has used here at Grace Fellowship in South Florida, like other places around the world, and increasingly here in the United States. South Florida is a place where people have lots of questions about God, the Bible, Jesus. And so this book does many things. The top two are probably number one, it will help you better understand as a believer why you believe what you believe, what the Bible says about God and Jesus and so forth. And then secondly, it's a wonderful, as I said, instrument that will equip you, put a tool in your toolbox to share and defend your faith. And so the book was written by Pastor Jeff. And so for today's deep dive, we kind of want to do a review. And if you haven't yet read the book, I encourage you to get the book. Again, it's called Persuasive Apologetics. Let me do a quick overview. There are 6 chapters. Let me just do chapters 1 and 2, and then we'll pass it over to Josh for chapters 3 and 4. So the book kicks off with chapter 1, which is entitled The Call of Duty. And chapter 1 focuses on why Christians have the duty, the responsibility to contend for the truth. And Pastor Jeff mentions 3 reasons for that. Number 1, the gospel's eternal ramifications. That simply means that we as believers understand that heaven and hell are real. And so we have the duty to articulate the truths of heaven and hell to everyone. 2 Corinthians 5:11 says, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade others. So contending for the faith is important because the gospel is true. Secondly, contending for the truth glorifies God. Psalm 96 says, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. So we don't seek our own glory. We seek God's glory. God's glory is the most important concept in the entire Bible. So defending the truth helps people understand who God is in Jesus Christ and this brings God glory. And then thirdly, contending for the truth is obeying God's directive. Matthew 22:37 tells us to love God with all of our mind. And of course, every generation is responsible for communicating the gospel to their culture and their setting and their language. Now, Pastor Jeff in this book gives a great definition for apologetics, and here it is. The art of loving people by addressing their questions in an intellectually rigorous, yet gentle and respectful manner. This robust definition of apologetics is derived straight from 1 Peter 3:15, which is sort of the watershed verse in the Bible about apologetics. 1 Peter 3:15 says, "In your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy." Here it is. "Always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." So a key emphasis in chapter 1 and throughout the whole book is that tone matters because people matter. Again, Peter wrote in 1 Peter 3:15, to defend the faith with gentleness and respect. So we don't talk down to people. We don't steamroll over people with our answers or our knowledge. In fact, at the end of chapter 1, Pastor Jeff mentions several stereotypes that non-believers have of Christians. One is the church curmudgeon. This is the grouchy, abrasive, get off my lawn Christian. Another one that he mentions is the compromising Christian. This is the one who downplays Scripture's exclusive language, like when Jesus claimed in John 14:6 to be the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. So the compromising Christian accommodates immorality. Now, they say it's all done in the name of love, but as Pastor Jeff points out in chapter 1, the most loving thing we can do is share God's truth with others. And then a third stereotype of a Christian is the Christian who's complacent and silent. In other words, they never speak up for God or for truth because they're afraid of offending someone. They equate disagreement with hate. If we have a disagreement, we must hate each other. And of course, that's simply not true. Jesus himself called on people to repent and believe the gospel. So chapter 1 really sets the stage for the rest of the book by this call of duty idea. Real quickly, chapter 2 is called Loving People Well. And by the way, this is one of several features I think about the book that makes it unique from other books on apologetics, because it doesn't just talk about what to say. It addresses in this book how to say it. Again, tone matters because people matter. So Pastor Jeff in chapter 2 starts off with a definition of worldview, and it's the lens through which we see the world. Everybody has a worldview. Now, not everybody can articulate their worldview, but everybody has a view of how the world operates. And so, as Pastor Jeff mentions here, exposing the problems in someone's worldview can begin with helping them understand the presuppositions that underlie their worldview. In other words, a lot of times people's beliefs are assumed but not assessed. In other words, they believe things without actually having reasons why they believe what they believe. And so chapter 2 emphasizes that apologetics may need to begin with challenging those presuppositions that a person's worldview is founded upon. For example, in the book, Pastor Jeff talks about the naturalistic worldview. It presupposes that there is no God. So it presupposes that since there is no God, miracles like the resurrection of Christ would not be possible. So apologetics helps identify worldviews, their strengths and their weaknesses, and can dismantle these presuppositions that, again, underline these worldviews, so then we can get the gospel to the person. And that's one of the benefits of apologetics. It's one of the purposes of apologetics is to remove barriers that keep people from placing their faith in Jesus. And then one last thing real quickly about chapter 2 is that also we find some really practical and common objections that non-believers make about the gospel, and Pastor Jeff provides effective rebuttals to those. For example, he mentions the idea that Christianity has outdated moral standards. You've probably heard that one before. And it's the idea that, come on, we're in the 21st century, and you need to be on the right side of history. Those are popular phrases we hear nowadays. And Pastor Jeff gives a couple of great rebuttals to that in his book in chapter 2. And then also the idea of, I feel constricted by Christian morality. If I become a follower of Christ, I'm going to have to give up too much, and so forth. And again, in the book in chapter 2, we find some great practical responses to that. So the big point of chapter 2 in the book is that worldview presuppositions are intensely personal. And so we need to have the right knowledge about what a person believes, but also deal with the person with the right loving tone. So chapter 1, call of duty. Chapter 2, loving people well. A great start into these chapters that dig a little bit deeper now into things like tactics and things called undercutting defeaters. So Josh, I'll pass it over to you to talk about those, chapters 3 and 4.
Great job, Larry.
Thanks.
He always makes it so challenging every week. Every time I have to follow Larry, he does such a great job. Great job. In chapter 3, Pastor Jeff, you provide us a summary of the different apologetic tactics that Christians often employ, beginning with classical apologetics, which is a two-step approach to defending the faith. The first step involves proving the existence of God through logical, reasonable arguments. Arguments like the teleological arguments from design, the moral law argument, and the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument is one that I often go with, and it flows like this. Premise number one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Like if we look at this water bottle here, we know that it didn't just magically poof into existence. Like it had a cause, it had a designer behind it. And then we look at the universe, and scientists have proven that the universe is not eternal. Like the evidence shows that it had a definite beginning. So the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And that cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and unimaginably powerful. And who fits that description? There's only one, and that is God. And then after making that logical argument for God's existence, then the classical apologist will move on to step 2, and where you identify that God as the triune God of Christianity through presenting supporting evidence like the historicity of the life, the crucifixion, and especially the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, Pastor Jeff, you give us a boxing analogy to explain how these two steps work together, comparing the arguments for God's existence to the jab and the evidence that's given to the knockout punch that is hopefully used by God to knock out a person's objections, doubts, and unbelief. And I love boxing. I love MMA. I love this whole chapter and all of the illustrations. Then next you move on to...
We have people who are praying for both of us right now.
Yeah,
help our pastors to achieve a basic level of maturity one day.
Yes.
To which we will say, praise the Lord, we'll knock that out too. So,
amen.
Violent metaphors
like Chuck
continue.
Liddell.
That's right.
Yeah, he's coming up here soon. He's coming up here right now, actually. So the second tactic is evidentialism. And this is the one-step approach to Christian apologetics, which reminds me of Chuck Liddell's fighting approach in the octagon, in the UFC, MMA fighting.
All of our cultured crowd is leaning in strongly at this point.
Chuck Liddell's approach was, listen, I don't need to throw any jabs. I'm going in there swinging. Every punch that he threw to knock the other person out.
That's right.
Similarly, with an evidentialist, they're like, I don't need your jabs. I'm just going to come with the evidence. I'm just coming with the evidence to knock out all of those objections, doubts, and
Josh, to your point, that's a great point, because Chuck Liddell was known as having an awkward stance. So even for those of us that haven't shared the gospel yet, we're like, well, I'm awkward. We're like, well,
and he had
Chuck Liddell style apologetics.
This may be weird, but he also had an awkward body too. He didn't have like your typical ripped, like UFC fighter body. And I mean, he did look crazy, but his hands were like cement blocks.
He was a trained fighter, but
he
was not above, some little Debbies.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Third. Let's move on from that one real quick.
Larry's like, cut all this. Just cut it. Keep going to what Josh is talking and cut Jeff out.
Third, you summarize presuppositionalism, which you spoke to a little bit, Larry. And it offers a unique perspective within Christian apologetics. It emphasizes the foundational beliefs that underpin one's worldview. It highlights the role that our presuppositions, our assumptions make. It challenges the notion that evidential arguments alone are sufficient for persuading someone to accept Christianity. At its core, presuppositionalism suggests that everyone operates from certain fundamental assumptions or presuppositions, whether they acknowledge them or not, whether they realize they have them or not. These presuppositions shape how individuals interpret evidence and make sense of the world around them. And instead of attempting to argue for Christianity based on external evidence alone, the presuppositionalist will argue that it's more effective to challenge the non-Christian's presuppositions and demonstrate the coherence and consistency of the Christian worldview while displaying the incoherence and the inconsistency of the non-Christian worldview. In this way, presuppositionalism shifts the burden of proof onto the skeptic, onto the non-Christian, challenging them to justify their own presuppositions while asserting the validity of the Christian worldview. It emphasizes the necessity of acknowledging and examining one's foundational beliefs before engaging in discussions about the existence of God or the evidential truth supporting Christianity. So it's much different than what we see with the classical apologists or the evidential apologists. And then lastly, you talked about Reformed epistemology, REs. And this is a captivating approach to apologetics. And both Reformed epistemology and presuppositionalism, they find their roots in Reformed theology. I think you call Reformed epistemology a close cousin to presuppositionalism. So this captivating approach, Reformed epistemology to apologetics, it really challenges the conventional idea that belief in God necessitates like this explicit provable evidence or these arguments like the cosmological or teleological arguments or evidence surrounding biblical historicity or the resurrection of Jesus. Instead, it advocates for that Reformed epistemology that belief in God can be considered properly basic. It is a basic, proper belief. It is a fundamental belief that doesn't require further evidence or justification to be rational. They argue that akin to like beliefs in the external world, other minds, belief in God can be similarly basic. And one of the most impactful aspects of this approach is its reminder that the burden of proof doesn't always rest on the shoulders of the Christian. Right. When someone asserts a claim like God doesn't exist or evolution is more plausible than a deity in the sky, there's often a tendency to counter those claims with arguments. However, Reformed epistemology prompts us and prompts that person making that claim to reevaluate their beliefs. It challenges them that say, hey, if you're going to make this claim, you have to support your claim. So whoever makes the assertion, whoever makes the claim, has the responsibility to then make the argument that supports their claim. So Reformed epistemology, presuppositionalism really takes the burden off the Christian and places it on the skeptic. And then into chapter 4, Jeff, you really transition to another tactic with the undercutting defeaters. You call them UCDs. And you talk about what they are and why they're important. And UCDs are arguments that really bypass conclusions and really aim to undermine the reasons for believing in those particular conclusions. In other words, UCDs challenge the entire thought process that led to certain beliefs that we would deem false. And to change a person's belief system, to change a person's false beliefs, to change a person's worldview, you really need to first dismantle its foundation. The reasons for their conclusions, the reasons for their beliefs, before you ever can really provide compelling evidence for the truth of biblical Christianity. And to dismantle someone's foundation, that's really hard work. And as you point out, Jeff, you had a friend in the business world that always would say, when you're working on the hard stuff, it's a sign that you're actually dealing with the real stuff. And that's what's happening here when you use the tactic of a UCD, an undercutting defeater. And speaking of hard stuff, we're going back to MMA fighting. You compare UCDs to a Muay Thai leg kick that attacks the foundation of a fighter. Because if you can weaken the legs, the foundation of a fighter, I don't care how big, how strong, how mean he looks, I don't care if he has tattoos on his head like Chuck Liddell, if you can weaken that foundation, eventually that entire fighter will crumble. It's similar in basketball. Like if we have a team that is much bigger than us and we're a smaller team, we want to get out and we want to run. We say get into their legs. We want to weaken that foundation because we know that if they get exhausted, that exhaustion makes just cowards of us all. And it can really do damage to that side. So similarly with apologetics, like we want to go after the foundational views and beliefs that led them to their ultimate belief system and their ultimate conclusions about the world, about reason, about logic, about God. And when you really look at Scripture, Jesus was a proponent of UCDs. He used them. And I wanted to give one example from Mark 3 that you give in your book, Jeff, where we can see Jesus there. He's rising to fame. And as we know, with fame comes increased criticism. The scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying that Jesus was possessed by Beelzebul, and by the prince of demons, he was casting out demons. And in response, Jesus calls them to him, and he asks them, how can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but is coming to an end. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man. Then indeed he may plunder his house. So in this passage of Scripture, Jesus responds to the scribes' accusations without getting overly emotional or defensive. He instead identifies their error and undercuts their specific accusation by pointing out the inconsistency of their logic. He explains that it wouldn't make sense for him to be a demon wrangler if he were in cahoots with Satan, since it would mean that he was destabilizing Satan's own organization. It just doesn't make logical sense. So Jesus points out that if Satan were divided against himself, he would not be able to stand. So the scribes, what did they do? They had allowed their jealousy to cloud their intellect, and Jesus simply exposed that. He exposed their faulty reasoning that leads to their ridiculous conclusion. So we want to do the same. We want to go after just the foundational thought process that allowed them to get to the point where they have these faulty beliefs. Now, for our viewers out there, they may be asking now, like, which tactic is best for me? Should I be an evidentialist? Should I be a classical apologetic person? Should I be a presuppositionalist or an RE, or use UCDs? But I love what you do, Jeff. You really challenge us to be eclectic in our apologetics, to really recognize that every single person that we deal with is different. They have different objections. They have different hurts. They have different life experiences. They have different doubts. They have different forms of unbelief. So I really want our viewers to understand the importance of studying all the different tactics. And then when you sit down with a person or you have a conversation with a person, whether in person or online, you recognize the tactic that person needs. So if I'm dealing with a person that's a Muslim or a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon, I don't need to make logical arguments for God's existence. I'm wasting my time in there. They already believe that a God exists. So maybe for them, I go right into the evidence that supports Christianity, and it being the most logical explanation for how the world began and how God has saved us and how God will one day restore everything. If I'm dealing with a naturalist, then I really want to maybe take a presuppositional approach or an RE approach. So it's really important that we train ourselves to know how to use all the different tactics so that we can really deal with the individual that's in front of us. Because ultimately, we're not just about winning an argument. We want to win the heart of that person. We want God to use our apologetics to build a bridge between theism, deism, all the way to and through a saving faith, Trinitarian monotheism. I mean, that's ultimately what we want to use. In all of these tactics, they have their strengths, they have their weaknesses. So I would just say to our viewers, like, equip yourselves with all of this. and then really examine the person that you're dealing with, and just allow the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you on what that specific person needs. So Jeff, I turn it over to you to talk to us about historical Jesus and his competitors there in chapter 5, and then on to chapter 6, and the hope that we have in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, let's do it. Great stuff, Josh. Great stuff, Larry. Great content. I heard a statement recently by one of the leaders at a North American Mission Board evangelism training event, and he said, a drowning person is rarely interested in saving others. And so in light of that, applied to our questions, there's a professor of mine years ago in a religion class in college, and he said that our questions can be like weights on a seesaw. He said, if you have questions, if you're a natural questioner, for some of us, we're not trying to be disruptive. We're not trying to be difficult. We're not trying to be extremely a critical spirit, but we just need to see how things fit together. He said, if you continue to have question after question after question, the weight on the scale of doubts, uncertainty, questions, ambiguities will become so heavy if you're not pursuing those. Whenever you get hit by the next question relating to the truth of the Bible, or the uniqueness of Jesus Christ, or the existence of God for that matter, he said it can begin to be to where your faith, you've got more questions than you do robust, like, yes, I know this is true because of these reasons. He said, so when you have a question, I'll never forget this, he said, research it, like a genuine question, not just, that's interesting, but it doesn't really matter. But like an actual question about the core of our faith. In other words, true, historic, biblical Christian theism. He said, research it into the ground. And man, this guy has so much respect for him, even still today. He could read Greek, German, Hebrew, just a godly man, and he knew how to surf. Like, come on, like I want to be you, right? And Dr. Ebert, great godly man. And so I remembered that, and he said, what will happen is the more you research your questions in the ground, research it online, read books, find good books, talk to people, talk to pastors, professors, seek people out who may not even be in your current social circle. He said, you'll have those questions answered, and then the seesaw, the weight of that evidence will be so heavy that even if you get hit by a question that you've never even thought possible, and you're like, man, I don't know, I've never considered that scientific argument against the existence of God, so to speak. He said, you've already got so much in terms of the weight of evidence to where you know that there is evidence for the truth of the Bible and Christianity and the existence of God. It's not gonna rock your boat. It may be something you really need to consider and look into and research, but you will have already had heavy weights on the side of evidence for the Lord. So in light of that, if you've been watching Deep Dive or engaged in the life of this church or another church, and you feel like you are drowning under your questions, please let us know. We would love to serve you, encourage you, talk with you, even debate with you if you're willing to do that. And pursue what is truth. And we believe that God wants us to have clarity. I don't think we'll ever have all of our questions answered, but we'll have enough answered to where we can move forward with Jesus and not just be constantly drowning under the what-ifs of apologetics. So in terms of what makes Jesus different than all other religious leaders, I think one of the things that rises to the surface, one of the qualities, is that Jesus was greater than the prophets of the Hebrew Bible. For one reason, many, but one will highlight, it was because Jesus had authority that no other prophet had. John 7:45 and 46, it says, the officers came then to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, why did you not bring him? So they wanted these guys to bring Jesus to them. And the officers answered, no one ever spoke like this man. Like, Jesus had a category of speaking. He had such a depth of authority that they didn't know what to do with it. Mark chapter 7, verse 22 said, and they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. Now, the scribes were good scholars. And one way that you can know a scholar knows his or her stuff is if they are engaging with other scholarly works, not they're on YouTube with a cell phone yelling into it, telling you this is what I feel and think. That's a person who's very verbose and has a lot of feelings, which is fine as long as we're locked in with the truth, but it doesn't mean that they've actually done their homework and read what is actually genuine research. The scribes would quote other scribes, other writers, authorities, but Jesus would say stuff like, I say to you, like I am he, which is not something that you really find if you've looked on any level into the writings of Buddha, to where he would say things like, be lights unto yourself. Jesus would say, and did say, I am the light of the world. So Buddha, when you look at kind of the general feel of his writings, it was more like, hey, there's a path out there. You follow your path. You become your own light. You find your path. And Jesus was saying to everyone who would listen, look to me. Follow me, believe me. Buddha would never say that because even Buddha had enough self-awareness to know I'm not he, but Jesus was. John chapter 10, beginning verse 17, Jesus is like on full boss mode on steroids. I love John 10. He says, because I laid down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. He's talking about his own life. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. So when you look at the statements and the claims of Jesus, it's qualitatively like nothing else. It is in a class of its own. And it's very much unlike Muhammad. Specifically, many differences there, but one would be in relation to women. I saw a meme recently that said every cult leader or religious founder, obviously outside of the truth of Scripture, and those men who were very much led by their own desires, often had one message, and it was this: I've heard from an angel or I've heard from God, and a big part of that message is that the angel or God told me that I should have multiple wives. Whether it's Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormons, whether it's Muhammad, and there's a million other cult leaders in between. David Koresh would be one example. The New Testament, the Scriptures, Jesus himself calls us to walk in purity. One man, one woman for life, specifically for men. The same rules apply to you. But when a person is led by the flesh, you're going to see that ideology or that theology support the fleshly desires, which outside of Christ is for men to be with as many women as they can without getting caught or have permission to do. So just backing away from some of the philosophical, theological, archaeological evidences for Christianity that are not there for other religions and worldviews. When a guy says that he's heard from the Almighty and that gives him the ability to just have sex with many women. Oh, and by the way, in Islam, that's also what you have to look forward to in the afterlife. It should cause us to just back up for a few moments and say, is this really from God if God is holy? Shouldn't it be more than just about power and sex? We know from Jesus, never got married, and he treated women with dignity, compassion, and respect. A completely different character than Muhammad, Joseph Smith, and other religious and cult leaders throughout history. Here's what C.S. Lewis has to say in this incredible article called The Uniqueness of Jesus Christ on the cslewisinstitute.org. And I'll read this fairly lengthy statement, but I think it's very, very, very important for our discussion here. Lewis says, on the one side, clear, definite moral teachings. So he's distinguishing Jesus from these other leaders. On the other, claims which, if not true, are those of a megalomaniac compared with whom Hitler was the most sane and humble of men. There is no halfway house and there is no parallel in other religions. If you had gone to Buddha and asked him, are you the son of Brahma, which is sort of the Hindu and even Buddhist conception of the ultimate reality, namely God, he would have said, my son, you are still in the veil of illusion. If you had gone to Socrates and asked, are you Zeus? He would have laughed at you. If you had gone to Muhammad and asked, "Are you Allah?" he would have first rent his clothes, torn his clothes, and then cut your head off. If you had asked Confucius, "Are you heaven?" I think he would have probably replied, "Remarks which are not in accordance with nature are in bad taste." Then Lewis further explains, the idea of a great moral teacher saying what Christ said is out of the question. In my opinion, the only person who can say that sort of thing is either God or a complete lunatic suffering from that form of delusion which undermines the whole mind of man. If you think you are a poached egg when you are looking for a piece of toast to suit you, you may be sane, but if you think you are God, then there is no chance for you. What Lewis is saying is that if you pull the "hey, I'm God" card, you either gotta be or you are so off, it's almost impossible to bring you back to a place of sanity. Then he makes this statement. We may note in passing that he was never regarded, Jesus that is, as a mere moral teacher. He did not produce that effect on any of the people who actually met him. In fact, he produced mainly 3 effects: hatred, terror, and adoration. There was no trace of people expressing mild approval. So what we're saying from Lewis's lengthy statement is that for people to say, hey, Jesus is, just a moral teacher, they've actually never fully engaged with the statements of Jesus. They've probably never actually read the Bible, like to read it, to actually follow the words and follow the concepts, simply because there are people who are terrified of Jesus, right? Like, oh my goodness, who is this guy? People who hated Jesus, and then those who adored Jesus because they knew that he was God incarnate. So we would say that, and to kind of turn the discussion regarding apologetics in a little bit of a different direction. There are limitations to apologetics and the real issue of what's behind it all. We believe that argumentation and evidence and clearly explaining things can help show and even clarify to other people that we do have a warranted evidence confidence in Jesus Christ. But our trust in Jesus is not exclusively in the realm of the intellectual. That there does exist a deeper access to truth about God, which John Calvin would call the sensus divinitatus, which is the innate awareness of God's existence. And when a person trusts in Jesus, in other words, when the horse is led to water, but the horse decides to drink, right? We can be led to evidence, but as one apologist said, we can't make people think. We can have all the evidence in the world, but if I truly want to live my own life and say, you know what, all the evidence may point to Christ, it may point to the sufficiency and the truth of the Bible, the inspiration, the infallibility of the Bible. In fact, it may point to the existence of God, the God of the Bible, but I don't care because I don't want to change. Then apologetics can help us understand the truth of the Bible, but apologetics alone, argumentation alone, amazing old school books. John Warwick Montgomery, Faith Founded on Facts, Essays in Evidential Apologetics, 1978, in the year of the Fu Manchu, right? And the hair bands getting ready to be in the 80s full blast. This stuff is great, but it can't alone by itself transform our hearts. You say, well, Jeff, are you saying apologetics is pointless? No, it is a means that God has ordained, I believe, we believe, to help people understand who he is. And it's a means to glorify God, but argumentation alone cannot save us. Further, for followers of Jesus, there's the witness of the Holy Spirit. Now, why do we mention that? Because we want to grow in our ability to explain the gospel well. But don't feel that just because you can't explain it as clear as you desire to, or as clear as someone else may demand of you, that therefore your faith is invalid. You are Christ's because of the witness of the Holy Spirit and the fruit, the repentance that he is creating in your life, the love, the joy, the peace, the patience, the kindness, the fruit of the Holy Spirit, and just the incredible growth that God does from within that you may not be able to fully explain in an intellectual way, but it is there nonetheless. So all that being said is that Apologetics can help tremendously, but like Paul Moser said, the chief human deficiency regarding God is not in our explanatory or intellectual abilities, but it is rather in our moral orientation regarding authority or lordship over our lives. At the end of the day, am I willing to say and to submit to Christ as Lord? That's what all apologetics is. That's what all true theology should be about, the submission to the power and the goodness of Jesus Christ. So thank you guys for your discussion. Thank you to our team who's recorded this extra long episode here on Deep Dive. And we're grateful to you as the viewer. Again, we're going to be taking a break from Deep Dive in this season. But if you have questions, let us know. There's a link in the description below. Just go to gograce.church/connect card. We would love to engage with you. If you're online or you're here in the area, we'd love to see you this Sunday as we gather together online and in person, 8:30, 10, or 11:30 a.m. May the Lord bless you. And Jeff Robinson, Josh Robinson, and Larry Starkey signing off here in the studio, West Palm Beach.